I was 4 years old the first time my mother sold my smile. Not that I knew it then. I knew only that Sienna was beautiful, the kind of beautiful that made strangers stop us on the street to tell her she should be in magazines, the kind that made her sigh and say, I was, once, with a sadness I didn't understand until I was old enough to recognize regret as a performance. I knew that she loved cameras, loved the click and flash, loved the way I looked through the lens, her little muse, her private model, her masterpiece. I knew that after every photo session, she would hold me close and smell my hair and say, You are my retirement plan, Freya, my pension, the only thing I made that the world actually wants. I thought it was a joke. Mothers joke about their children being expensive, being exhausting, being the reason they can't have nice things. I laughed. I posed. I wore the dresses she chose. White ones, the ones with lace, the ones that made me look like a doll, an angel, a commodity. My name is Freya. I'm 32 years old. I'm a casting director for television in Los Angeles, which means I spend my days deciding who gets to be seen and how, which face, which body, which version of innocence or experience will appear on screens in millions of homes. I have cast 3 Emmy-winning series. I have discovered actors who became stars. And I have never, not once, allowed a minor on my set without a parent, a guardian, a lawyer, and a contract that I personally review to ensure that no child is ever again what I was, a product without a price tag I could read. This is not a story about photography. This is a story about what happens when the person who should protect your image becomes your pimp. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, my name is Freya, and this channel is where we tell the truth about the mothers who call it art when it's commerce, who call it documentation when it's distribution. If this is your first time listening, hit that subscribe button. We post stories every week, real stories, hard stories, stories about women who stopped being their mother's portfolio. Here's my story. Sienna was a model in the 90s. Not famous, not the kind of name you would know, not the face that launched campaigns or defined eras. She was the other kind, beautiful enough to book work, not distinctive enough to become indispensable. She did catalogs. She did showroom fittings. She did the kind of shoots where you're the body in the background, the smile in the crowd, the anonymous pretty that makes the product look desirable. She hated it. She told me so often, usually while drinking wine from a box and scrolling through old portfolios on her laptop. I had it, Freya, I had the look, but I didn't have the killer instinct. I didn't know how to sell myself. I thought talent would be enough. She would look at me then, her eyes focusing with the particular intensity of a woman who sees not a daughter but a second chance. But you have something I never had, innocence. Real innocence, not performed, that sells, that always sells. I didn't understand what she meant. Not at 4 when she started the serious photography, the sessions with professional lighting she rented, the backdrops she hung in our living room, the white dresses that were never for church. Not at 6 when she began restricting my diet so I would stay camera-ready, so my cheeks wouldn't round, so my stomach wouldn't soften into the normal shape of a child who eats when hungry. Not at 8 when she started homeschooling me, for flexibility, she said, so we can shoot when the light is right. And I lost the friends who might have told me that other mothers didn't do this, didn't say this, didn't look at their daughters the way a merchant looks at inventory. I understood at 14, or rather, I understood that I didn't understand, and the not understanding was so terrifying that I had to find out. It was a Tuesday. Sienna was out, a meeting with a client, which meant she was negotiating prices for the latest set. I was supposed to be doing algebra, but I had finished early, bored, restless, hungry for something I couldn't name. I wandered into her office, the second bedroom that had been converted into a studio, a workspace, a command center for the business I still thought was digital marketing. The computer was on. It was always on. Sienna never shut it down, never logged out, never considered that I might be curious about the files she guarded with passwords I was never supposed to know. But she had been in a hurry that morning. She had left the screen unlocked. I sat in her chair, I moved the mouse, and I opened a folder labeled Archive Private. What I saw made me vomit. Not immediately, first I froze, my body becoming something other than mine, my breath becoming something I had to remember to do. Then I scrolled. Then I saw more. Then I ran to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left but bile and the realization that my entire childhood had been a product, an inventory, a catalog of images sold to people I would never know. There were thousands of photos. Organized by age, by outfit, by theme. Me at 4, in a white nightgown, sleeping with a teddy bear, the teddy bear I still had, the one I thought was private, the one that had been a prop in a set I didn't know I was performing. Me at 6, in a swimsuit, on a beach we had never visited. Sienna had used a green screen, I realized later, had composited my body onto sand and waves that were not mine. Me at 8, in a school uniform that was not my school's uniform, holding an apple, looking up at the camera with an expression I recognized as innocent because I had practiced it, because Sienna had directed it, because she had told me think about puppies, think about Christmas morning, think about being happy. The prices were listed in a spreadsheet: $50 for set of 10, $200 for set of 50, $500 for exclusive content, images that were not in the standard catalog, poses that were more artistic, angles that I now understood were designed to appeal to people who wanted something specific from the body of a child. The buyers had usernames: Art Lover 47, Daddy Collector, Innocence Appreciator. The description Sienna wrote: natural beauty, no makeup, authentic childhood moments captured by a loving mother. Loving mother. The words appeared on the screen while I was still vomiting, while my body was trying to expel something that had been inside me for 10 years without my knowledge. I found the website, Sweet Innocence, a subscription service, monthly updates, all models photographed by their own mothers. Real families, real moments, real beauty. There was a forum where subscribers discussed the merchandise, rated the sets, requested specific poses or outfits or themes. More Freya in white, one wrote. Freya sleeping is my favorite, another. Does she do video, would pay premium? I was 14. I had never kissed anyone. I had never been to a real school. I had never had a friend who wasn't Sienna's friend's child, supervised, brief, performative. And I had been sold monthly to hundreds of strangers who knew my name, my face, my sleeping body, my practiced innocence, all without my knowledge, all with my mother's direction, all under the label of art and documentation and a mother's love. Sienna came home at 6. I was sitting in the living room in the dark with the laptop open on the coffee table. I had not moved in 4 hours. I had not cried. I had not screamed. I had simply sat and looked at the screen and felt something inside me break in a way that I knew even then would never fully heal. She saw the laptop, she saw my face, and she smiled, the same smile she used for cameras, for clients, for the performance of motherhood that had been her most successful product. Freya, she said. Her voice was warm, reasonable, the voice of a woman who has already prepared for this conversation. I know this looks strange. I know you're upset. But let me explain what. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was too flat, too empty, too much like the voice I used when she told me to look happy or look sleepy or look like you don't know I'm here. Explain that I did this for us. For you. Your father, she laughed, a short, bitter sound. Your father left us nothing. Less than nothing. Debt. And I had a skill, Freya. I had a camera. I had you. And I built something. I built us a life. The house, your clothes, your education, my education. I stood up. The movement surprised us both. You homeschool me so I can shoot when the light is right. I haven't had a friend since I was 8. I haven't been to a birthday party. I stopped. The words were too big, too many, too much like the vomit that had finally stopped but left my throat raw. You sold me. You sold my body. To people who, I pointed at the screen, at a comment I had memorized, who want more Freya in white, who want Freya sleeping, who want beauty. Sienna interrupted. Her voice had changed. The warmth was gone. What remained was something harder, more honest, the voice she used when negotiating with clients or criticizing my posture. Who want something real in a world of fake. Do you know how many mothers whore out their daughters on actual porn sites? I'm not one of them. I never touched you. I never let anyone touch you. I kept you safe, Freya. I kept you pure. And yes, I monetized that purity. Because purity without resources is just poverty with better lighting. I stared at her. I saw her, really saw her for the first time. Not the beautiful mother, the struggling artist, the devoted parent, but the businesswoman, the entrepreneur. The woman who had looked at her daughter and seen not a child but a niche market. I'm calling the police, I said. She laughed. Not cruelly. Genuinely. As if I had said something adorable. Oh, Freya, sweetheart, do you think I haven't prepared for this? Do you think I don't have lawyers, contracts, releases you signed I was for, that your guardian signed on your behalf? I'm your mother, Freya, your legal guardian, your manager, your photographer. Everything I did was legal. Everything. She walked to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, took out the wine box. California law protects parental photographers. The images aren't explicit, they're artistic. They're there, my voice cracked, without my knowledge, without my consent, sold to people who appreciate you, who value you, who pay for the privilege of seeing what I see every day. She poured wine into a coffee mug. You're angry now, I understand. But you'll see someday. When you have children of your own, when you understand what it costs to raise a child alone, you'll see that I did what I had to do, that I made sacrifices, that you made me the sacrifice. She looked at me. For a moment, a split second, I saw something in her eyes. Not guilt, not remorse, recognition. The recognition of a merchant who has finally realized that her product has developed consciousness, that the inventory is talking back, that the business model has reached its expiration date. You're emotional, she said. Sleep on it. We'll talk in the morning. I didn't sleep. I packed a bag, clothes. The teddy bear, my prop, my betrayal, my childhood. $200 I had saved from allowances Sienna gave me for good shoots. I walked to the bus station. I took a bus to Los Angeles. I was 15 years old, with a face that had been sold to strangers, a body that had been cataloged and priced, and a name that I would spend the next 15 years trying to escape. I went to the police. Of course I did. I was 15, terrified, furious, desperate for someone to tell me that what Sienna had done was wrong, was illegal, was something that could be punished and undone. The detective was kind. He listened. He took notes. He asked to see the files, the website, the contracts. I gave him everything: the laptop I had taken, the passwords I had memorized, the screenshots I had made in the 4 hours before Sienna came home. And then he called a colleague, a lawyer from the district attorney's office. They looked at the evidence together. They made phone calls. They consulted books, statutes, precedents. And then the detective came back, and his kindness had changed into something else: pity, regret, the particular helplessness of a man who wants to help but has been told he can't. Freya, he said, I'm sorry. What your mother did, it's morally wrong, it's reprehensible, but legally. He paused, looking at his notes. California law. Section 311. The Miller test. The images aren't legally obscene. They're not sexually explicit. He struggled with the word, they're artistic, parental documentation. The courts have ruled that parents have broad rights to photograph their children, to distribute those photographs, to sell them to predators, to sell them to collectors, enthusiasts. The law doesn't distinguish. The law is wrong. He didn't argue. He just looked at me, this child with her catalog of stolen images, and he said, I know, but I can't arrest her. I can't charge her. I can't do anything except, he handed me a card, refer you to victim services, to a shelter, to people who can help you build a life away from her. I took the card. I went to the shelter. I became emancipated, a process that took 8 months, that required me to prove I could support myself. That made me a legal adult at 16 with a GED and a job at a coffee shop, and a room in a transitional housing unit that smelled like disinfectant and other people's desperation. I changed my name. Legally, permanently, from Freya Sienna Voss to Freya Chen, my grandmother's maiden name, the only family I had that Sienna hadn't contaminated. I built a life. Slowly. Carefully. With the understanding that my face was dangerous, that my past was a product that could be searched and found, that any success I achieved would carry the risk of exposure. I became a casting director. Not despite my history, but because of it, because I understood in my bones what it meant to be looked at, to be chosen, to be commodified. I knew the difference between a gaze that sees and a gaze that consumes. I knew the questions to ask, the contracts to demand, the protections to put in place. I became known as the director who protects, who insists on closed sets for minors, on parent-free trailers, on contracts that specify exactly how images can be used and for how long and with whose approval. I won awards. I cast stars. I built a reputation that was separate from my face, my history, my mother's catalog, and I watched her, from a distance, through proxies, through the occasional Google search that I performed in incognito mode, late at night, with my hands shaking. Sienna continued. The website changed names, Sweet Innocence became Natural Moments, became A Mother's Eye, but the business model remained. She found other models, other daughters, other mothers desperate enough or deluded enough to believe that their child's image was theirs to sell. She expanded. She became an agent, connecting mothers with collectors, taking a percentage. She started a podcast, The Art of Maternal Photography, where she discussed the criminalization of maternal expression and the censorship of female artists. She wrote a book proposal, Through the Lens, A Mother's Eye, A Daughter's Growth. She had followers, fans, a community of maternal photographers who saw her as a pioneer, a martyr, a victim of a society that didn't understand the bond between mother and muse. And she wanted more. She wanted legitimacy. Fame, the kind of platform that would make her not just a merchant but a movement. A Netflix documentary, a TED Talk, a seat at the table where decisions were made about who could be seen and how. I knew this because I read her emails. Not directly, I had learned, in my years of emancipation, that direct confrontation was dangerous, that Sienna was legally protected and socially connected and fundamentally unashamed. But I had resources now. Contacts, the kind of professional network that could place a mole, a researcher, a fan who could gain access to Sienna's communications and report back. She wanted a documentary. She had pitched it to 3 production companies. She had been rejected by all of them, not because of ethics, but because her story was too niche, too controversial, too likely to attract legal challenges. She was frustrated, desperate, looking for an angle, a hook, a way in. And I had one. I created a production company. Shell Corporations, Anonymous funding, a name that meant nothing and everything, Veritas Media, truth as commodity, truth as weapon. I hired a director, Elena Voss, no relation, a woman who had won an Oscar for a documentary about systemic abuse in the entertainment industry, who believed she was making a film about the exploitation of the female body in visual culture. I didn't tell Elena who I was. I told her I was an investor, a silent partner, someone who believed in her vision and wanted to support it. I gave her a target: Sienna Voss, maternal photographer, censored artist, victim of moral panic. I gave her access through my network, my contacts, my carefully constructed pipeline of information that led Elena to Sienna's door with a camera crew and a proposal. Sienna bit. Of course she did. She was hungry for legitimacy, for platform, for the Netflix logo that would transform her from merchant to martyr. She signed a contract, drafted by my lawyers, reviewed by no one she trusted because she had never learned to trust anyone who wasn't herself. The contract gave Veritas Media complete access to her archive, her process, her relationship with her models. It gave us rights in perpetuity. It gave us everything. Elena filmed for 8 months. She captured Sienna's world with the unflinching eye of a documentarian who believes she is exposing injustice. She filmed the photo sessions, mothers and daughters, the same dynamic I had lived, the same direction, the same product dressed in the language of art. She filmed the negotiations with collectors, Sienna's term, always Sienna's term, never buyers or predators or men who pay to look at children. She filmed the financial transactions, the shell companies, the offshore accounts that Sienna had established to protect her artistic income, and she filmed the models. Current ones. Girls of 8, 10, 12, whose mothers had signed releases they didn't understand, who believed they were helping their daughters' careers, who saw in Sienna the validation they had never received from a world that told them their only value was their children's visibility. Elena didn't know what she had. Not until the final month, when I sent her an anonymous package, documents, screenshots, the evidence of my own history that I had collected over 15 years. She called me frantic, demanding to know the source. I told her to keep filming, to trust the process, to understand that the story she was telling was bigger than she knew. And then I told her who I was. The final shoot was scheduled for Tuesday. Sienna's house, the same house where I had grown up, where the green screen still hung in the living room, where the white dresses still hung in a closet that smelled of lavender and commerce. Elena and her crew were there, setting up lights, preparing for what Sienna believed would be the climax of her documentary, her artistic statement, her defense of maternal expression, her moment of legitimacy. I arrived at noon. I didn't call ahead. I didn't announce myself. I simply walked in. The door was unlocked, as it always had been, because Sienna believed that her world was safe, that her narrative was controlled, that no one would dare disrupt her performance. She was in the kitchen, pouring wine into a coffee mug, talking to Elena about the purity of the maternal gaze. She looked up when I entered. She didn't recognize me, not immediately. I had changed, my hair was shorter, my face older, my body thicker in ways that cameras and diets had once prohibited. But she looked at me with the same evaluation she had used my entire childhood, the merchant's assessment, and I saw the moment of recognition flicker and die. Freya, her voice was uncertain. For the first time in my memory, Sienna Voss was not in control of the room. "Hello, Mom." I walked to the center of the living room, to the space where the green screen had hung, where the lights had burned, where I had performed innocence for a camera I thought belonged to love. "I hear you're making a documentary about maternal art, about the bond between mother and child." Elena was filming. I had told her to film everything, no matter what, no matter who objected. The crew was rolling. The lights were hot, and I was standing in the place where my childhood had been sold, wearing a black dress I had chosen myself, speaking in a voice that was finally, completely, irrevocably mine. "I have a story for your documentary," I said, not to Elena, to Sienna, to the camera, to the world that would eventually see this footage and understand, finally, what maternal photography meant when the mother was a merchant and the child was inventory. It's about a mother who sold her daughter. Not on a street corner, not in a dark room, but in daylight, with professional lighting, with contracts and websites and a subscription model. It's about a girl who didn't know she was a product until she was 14, who ran away at 15, who spent 15 years building a life while her mother continued selling other girls' innocence to the same collectors, the same enthusiasts, the same predators. Sienna's face had gone white. The wine mug was shaking in her hand. "Freya, you don't understand, this is private, you can't." "I can." I reached into my bag. I pulled out a folder, thick, organized, 15 years of documentation. I have the contracts, the financial records, the website archives, the communications with collectors, the prices, the descriptions, the forum posts where men discussed Freya sleeping like they were reviewing a restaurant, I turned to the camera. This is not art, this is not maternal expression. This is commerce in the one commodity that should never be sold, a child's right to be seen only by those who love her, not by those who pay for the privilege of looking. Sienna lunged. Not at me, at the camera, at Alina, at the equipment that was capturing her collapse. Turn it off, turn it off. This is my home, my documentary. You have no right, we have every right. My voice was steady. I had rehearsed this moment for 15 years in therapy sessions and nightmares and the quiet hours before dawn when I still searched for my own image on websites I couldn't control. You signed a contract, Mom, with Veritas Media, perpetual rights, complete access. You wanted legitimacy. You wanted platform. You wanted Netflix. I smiled. It was not a kind smile, you're getting it. The documentary was called The Price of Innocence. It premiered at Sundance. It won the Grand Jury Prize. It sold to Netflix for $12 million, money that I donated, every dollar, to a foundation I established for victims of image-based exploitation. The foundation's name, the Freya Chen Center for Visual Consent. Its mission, to help children and adults whose images have been distributed without their consent, to change laws that protect parental rights over children's autonomy, to teach the difference between being seen and being consumed. Sienna was arrested. Not for my photos, the statute of limitations had expired, the images were artistic, the law still protected her, but for the current models, for trafficking, for conspiracy, for the financial records that showed her agency was a network of exploitation that spanned 14 states and 3 countries. The mothers who had worked with her were arrested too, some contrite, some defiant, all facing the reality that their artistic expression had been commerce in children's bodies. The collectors, the art lover 47s and daddy collectors and innocence appreciators, were traced through the documentary's evidence. Arrested in 14 states. Charged with possession, with distribution, with crimes that carried sentences measured in decades. Some of them had been subscribers for 20 years. Some had collections that filled hard drives, that spanned generations of models, that represented thousands of childhoods commodified by mothers like mine. And the law changed. Not everywhere, not enough. But California closed the parental photographer loophole. The Miller test was updated. The definition of non-explicit exploitation was narrowed, sharpened, made into something that could protect children without criminalizing every family photo album. I testified before Congress. Not as a victim, I refused that label, that performance, that narrative of brokenness that Sienna would have sold if she could. I testified as a producer, as a casting director, as a woman who understood, professionally and personally, what it meant to be looked at, to be chosen, to be commodified. I spoke about consent. About contracts, about the difference between a child's image and a child's self. I never watched the documentary. I couldn't. I knew what was in it, my face, my history, my mother's voice describing me as product and inventory and my pension plan. I knew that millions of people had seen it, had discussed it, had formed opinions about my life that I would never control. But I also knew that every viewing was an exposure of Sienna's crime, a validation of my survival, a step toward a world where no child would be what I was. Sienna is in prison. 15 years, I don't visit her, but I send a letter every year on the anniversary of the Sundance premiere. One line, how much was it worth, Mom? Really, she has never answered. I don't expect her to. Some questions are not meant to be answered. They are meant to be asked repeatedly until the asking becomes its own form of justice. I'm Freya. I'm 34 years old. I'm on a film set when a girl approaches me, 16, nervous, hopeful, with a headshot that she holds like a ticket to a world she wants to enter. She was one of Sienna's models. Rescued by the foundation, counseled, supported, given the tools to build a life that is hers rather than her mother's product. I want to be seen, she says, but I want to decide how. I want my face to be mine. I look at her. I see myself, not the 4-year-old in the white dress, not the 14-year-old vomiting in the bathroom, not the 15-year-old on a bus to nowhere. I see the woman I have become, the one who decides who gets to be seen, the one who writes contracts that protect rather than exploit. The one who has learned that the gaze is not inherently violent, it is the absence of consent that makes it so. There's a casting tomorrow, I say, for a series about young women who reclaim their stories. The director is a woman who only works with informed consent, with contracts you can read, with the promise that no image leaves the set without your approval. If that sounds like what you want, your name is on the list. She nods. She doesn't thank me, not yet. She just holds her headshot tighter, and I see in her eyes the beginning of something I recognize. The understanding that visibility can be chosen, that being seen can be an act of agency rather than violation, that the face in the photograph can belong to the person who wears it. I watch her walk away. And I think she will be seen. but she will be seen as a person, not as product. And that is the only kind of seeing worth selling. If you're listening to this and someone sold your image, your face, your body, your childhood, your innocence, I want you to know, the photograph is not the person. The catalog is not the soul. And the child who grows up to decide who gets to be seen is not a victim. She is the director. She is the producer. She is the one who writes the contract that she was never offered. You are not the merchandise. You are not the inventory. You are not the content that subscribers consume. You are the camera. You are the lens. You are the woman who decides what gets framed, what gets lit, what gets seen, and what gets left in the dark where exploitation belongs. See you in the next story.